Hello everyone, Jose Prado with ManMadeSurvival here. I just wanted to remind you that this is the second part of the second video of this part series that I'm doing. So this one would be part 2B. If you have not seen part 1 or part 2A, I would really encourage you to listen to it because all the information goes together. Everything is part of the bigger picture, and you would understand the entire information better if you went back and listened to the entire thing. So I would really encourage you to do that if you have not already. All right, so I'm gonna do the introduction for the video, and then it's gonna, continue on from where I left off. Here it is.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
And the last time we talked, you didn't have good news about the dollar. You thought it could break up, but what it did do, it could get really hammered hard. But what it did do, since Election Day, it's off 4 or 5%. I mean, that's not a great sign for a world reserve currency where 60%, 70% of the business in America, in the world, is done in dollars, is off 4 or 5%. So your prediction of the dollar it didn't crash, but it sure got a pie in the face at the end of the year, down 5%, which is big for a currency used that widespread. What do you think about the dollar with all the currency printing?
The crash in the dollar hasn't happened. I'm very often too early on these things, but equally I'm very often right, I'm glad to say. I think that it is only a matter of time before we really do have a dollar crash. And the mechanism by which it will happen, I think, is foreigners holding the dollars will see the inflationary consequences of the money printing that is going on now, and therefore want higher interest rates on their dollars than they get at the moment. I mean, quite obviously, interest rates are far too low. I mean, when you get all this money printing, the effect on prices basically will lead to a situation where you have to raise interest rates to control the effect on price inflation. Otherwise, foreigners will just sell the dollar. Now, that gives us the key as to what is going to happen. If interest rates rise, the financial asset bubble will simply pop, along with, obviously, US treasuries, agency debt, and all the rest of it. Now, that brings a whole new dimension of trouble into the situation for the Fed. But now that we've got Biden in place in America, he will reflate the economy to ensure that the economy recovers after the COVID scare is over. Now, this, to my mind, is completely unrealistic because of the amount of money printing involved. I mean, if you look just at the year from last March, I'm cutting across your fiscal years, but from last March to today, we can see there's a total of over $8 trillion worth of QE required to pay for all the programs, and that includes Biden's 1.9 trillion, which I know hasn't been authorized yet. The figures are enormous. Now, there is absolutely no way that the dollar can hold its value with that level of money printing. And that's just to deal with COVID. Biden also wants to finance green spending. He also wants to ensure the economy recovers. How much more printing there's going to be on top of that, goodness only knows. I mean, the thing is a mess. But it's not just America. I mean, when I look at Europe, we've had the most extraordinary situation with vaccines. You can see that Europe is just, I mean, the leadership in Brussels is just completely incompetent. And when you get an incompetent government like that, the idea that they can handle a crisis, of course, forget it. The Eurozone banks are on the verge of bankruptcy. I mean, I'm going beyond insolvency. They are on the verge of bankruptcy. Now, how do you handle a situation like that when you've got an incompetent bunch of bureaucrats at the top? I mean, this is going to happen, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. This is another of my forecasts, which I was a bit too early on. But a combination of events around the world actually make the outlook really look stinking.
Well, you listen, I don't want to scold you. We didn't get a crash, but listen, everybody was talking about the dollar being strong, 6 months, 8 months ago when you made this call. You said the dollar's going to be weak. And this is the way the path is. And sure enough, you were right on that. The dollar, I mean, 5% in the world's reserve currency is not a small amount of money. But you're saying you start looking at all the ramp up of this, spendorama going on with all the COVID and the universal basic income and reflating the economy, you said, and you think all the currencies are going to tank, not just the dollar. Right.
It's almost inevitable. I mean, the dollar is doing the most reflation pretty well of any currency. But we all have the dollar as our reserve currency. And where the dollar goes, inevitably, we're all going to go. And, the question then is, at what point does it stop? I mean, at some stage, it has got to be stopped. Otherwise, governments have no money to spend. They can't pay their policemen, they can't pay their armies, they can't pay their bureaucrats, and importantly, the politicians don't even get paid because it's all worthless paper. So at some stage they will stop it, but probably very late in the collapse. The only way it can be stopped is basically to turn paper currencies back into gold substitutes. Now, I'm not talking about something that's going to happen at anything like the current price of gold. How far the purchasing power of the dollar deteriorates before the Biden administration is forced to accept that it's got to go back to a gold standard to save itself, goodness only knows.
So extremely important what you just heard, because when the dollar gets to the point where not even politicians can pay themselves, what are the steps that they're going to take? Okay, and the reason that we have to look at that is because those are going to be the very last people who are going to try to suffer to some type of economic collapse, as we know. All right, and it has always been the consensus that politicians are very, very selfish, and they're always going to look after themselves. And if they get presented with the problem of having a type of hyperinflationary moment where they cannot even pay their own bills, what are the steps that they're going to take? So that is what other countries are looking at. They're going to look at the United States, and they're doing that right now to kind of gauge how much longer can the United States be in control of the SWIFT system, be in control of the world. Because the SWIFT system is the system that the United States uses for them to be able to punish other countries, right, whenever they feel like it. Even though it wasn't supposed to be like that, it became one of the United States' tools to be able to clever other countries over the head. Now, they have abused it over the years. They have abused it against China. They have abused it against Russia. They have abused it against Iran. And because of all those steps that they have taken, what it has done is that it has made the allies look at that and say, wait a minute, we have to do something about this. All right, so we are going to see the shift from the United States because of two different reasons. One being is because we are spending so much money, we're printing money out of thin air, it's becoming worthless. And when it becomes the realization for other leaders throughout the world, then that's when the pullback is going to happen rapidly. Okay, now, the second thing that they're seeing is that if for whatever reason they disagree with the United States, they're going to see that people in their country, whether it's companies and or politicians, become sanctioned. They're going to lose the ability to do the things that they are doing right now. They would be compared to something like Venezuela or Iran, okay, and even to some extent like China and Russia. Right? The United States does take stronger approaches to countries that do not have nuclear weapons. So with that in mind, what is the other countries going to do? Now, I have a small video for you because I really want you to understand what the SWIFT system is. And this video should be hopefully no more than 3 minutes. So pay very close attention because it explains in depth what it's going to do, or what actually it's for, right? And how the United States have actually abused it. Here it is.
With Iran sanctions in question, we're joined now by producer Kay Pritzker. Kay, we were speaking as an In Question team and talking about the fact that SWIFT's been all over the news lately in lots of headlines, but people might not have an idea of what exactly this organization is. So can you just start by explaining what is SWIFT?
Yeah, so SWIFT is a private financial messaging service that's based in Belgium, and what that means is it facilitates the international financial transactions of most of the world. There are a bunch of different systems like SWIFT, but SWIFT is by far the most popular. It serves 11,000 financial institutions in over 200 countries. And basically, when anyone wants to buy or sell something internationally, SWIFT is the one that takes the payment information or the destination that the money is going to and makes sure that money reaches the right place in a secure fashion. And this replaced the telex system, which was basically SWIFT before SWIFT. And this system did the same thing, but it was much slower, and it didn't have a standardized universal code system like SWIFT does, so SWIFT was kind of an improvement on this outdated system.
SWIFT claims it's a neutral institution. Is that true?
No, so SWIFT definitely isn't neutral. Anyone can say that, but their actions have kind of shown the opposite. So starting off in 2006, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and LA Times released a series of articles in June that showed that the United States actually had a system called this Terrorist Finance Tracking Program. And this program allowed the CIA and the US Treasury to have backdoor access to SWIFT's database. So this gives them unprecedented access to, the world's financial transactions, who's sending what where, and this was done under the guise of stopping terrorism, which is the U.S.'s excuse for a lot of things. But this was obviously a violation of a lot of people's sovereignty, and it shows that SWIFT was willing to work with the CIA, with U.S. intelligence, as early as 2006. So that seems fairly unbiased.
But I want to move on to this final question because we don't have a lot of time left. Countries like Iran and Russia, as well as the EU, are saying, look, maybe it's time to look for an alternative to SWIFT. What alternatives are out there, and why would it assist these countries?
Yeah, so starting with Russia, there's SPFS, which is basically SWIFT, but it's controlled by Russia, which is a big deal. And this happened after 2014 when the UK was calling on SWIFT to remove Russia from the system because of what happened in Crimea. They said, Russia invaded Crimea, even though no one died there. And, this controversy didn't actually lead to them being de-SWIFTed, but Russia was thinking forward, and they said, further sanctions, future sanctions might remove us from SWIFT, so they created SPFS. Iran obviously was just de-SWIFTed recently and has been in the past, and their foreign minister recently announced that they already have alternatives on the table. They're looking at alternative means to SWIFT. We don't know what they are yet, but they would be used to conduct trade with the EU as well as other countries, which have all, vocally said, we want to continue engaging with Iran, we want to continue trading.
Right.
And Iran has also explored digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, similar to Venezuela, which just unveiled the petro. And that's a different strategy. SWIFT and things like that deal with hard currencies, but there's also digital currencies nowadays. And that would basically allow a country like Iran to make a payment digitally, to send money to someone's digital crypto wallet, for example. And you wouldn't need a SWIFT or an SPFS to do that. You just send it over the internet, basically. And then China is creating the China International Payment System, CIPS, which is another SWIFT alternative. And China is the second largest economy in the world. This would be a huge blow to the United States if they created the system. It could be used by most of the world, given the size of China's economy. And it would really thrust the yuan forward in the competition to become the global reserve currency. It would definitely make the yuan a much more popular currency, along with the US dollar and the euro.
All right. Well, it only seems to be a matter of time, considering even U.S. allies in Europe are looking for an alternative to SWIFT due to U.S. sanctions. In question, producer Kay Pritzker, thanks so much for coming on once again and breaking it all down.
All right, so now that you have some understanding on how the United States uses the SWIFT system for their own political purposes, now we're going to look into what other countries are looking at in order for them to be able to not come to the place where they have to choose another currency and have a hard transition to it, but rather how they're going to take baby steps to when they are ready to let go of the United States dollar to where it's no longer, feasible for them to be able to hold on to it. What are the steps that they're going to do now? They have this headline from doubleline.com. All right, and it really shows how other countries are getting prepared. And of course, all right, there's one country in particular who's going to take the throne. Once the United States is no longer the world's reserve currency, the reason that is going to accelerate the hyperinflation in the United States, as we have seen in other countries in the past, is because all this money is already out there. Right? What hyperinflation is It's just the money printing from from a country in order for them to be able to pretty much pay for their bills. If we're the reserve currency of the world, that means that we already have dollars printed out and out there all throughout the world. Okay? Now, combine that with the money that we have printed here in the United States for our own ventures. That all put together, once this system collapses, that is going to flood back into the United States. Okay? There's no real reason for the United States to print itself up there. All of this money floating back is going to provoke that very fast snowball effect to where it's going to rapidly shoot into the air, and we're going to have hyperinflation probably overnight. Probably worse than what we saw in Zimbabwe, worse than we have seen in Venezuela, because we already have all this money printed out there, and it's going to be worthless. It's not going to be backed by anything unless the United States government brings out the gold that they have, and it is a rumor that we have zero amount of gold anywhere in the world. So what they're going to do is probably they're going to try to confiscate it from the United States, from the citizens, or they're going to try to buy it off from them. So there would be the time when you're going to have to hold on to it and probably even hide it. I don't even want to say that I'm recommending you hiding it, so I don't, say that I'm doing something illegal. But the point is that you're going to have to look at the times, how things are going to be unfolding in those days, and you're going to have to take the right steps that you think is going to be for you and your family, okay? Even if you do not have gold and silver in your possession, what is going to be very beneficial for you to have for yourself is going to have for you to have your own property, for you to have your own animals, for you to have your own vegetable garden, for you to have everything in place, as I've taught it here, in order for you to withstand that type of scenario where it's going to be hyperinflation, not just for several days, for several weeks, or until your stash runs out. It's going to be for many, many years. That is the reason we have to transition from just stockpiling things to making sure that we can produce things, right? We have to move our way of thinking from consuming to producing. Now, this headline is going to show exactly who is going to be on top of the throne, okay? Double line warns events are in motion to remove dollar as reserve currency. As I mentioned, that's from doubleline.com. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. In the case of the international trade and global payments, that U.S. made aggressive use of sanctions and tariffs. Without some merit, Washington has argued that these actions level the playing field for global trade and punish bad global actors. But a series of equal and opposite reactions are occurring as nations move to remove the role of the US dollar at the center of global trade and finance. This will have a long-lasting structural impact in ending the dominance of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. These actions impacted nations beyond those directly targeted in the US actions. And today, many governments around the world are taking countervailing steps to remove their reliance on the dollar based on the global trade and finance system that has reigned since 1944. In November, 15 Asian countries comprising 30% of global GDP, a big chunk, signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, creating a free trade zone among these signatories. This agreement attempts to provide gains to trading with the regional partnership through reduction of trade and investment barriers and increase the incentives for economic integration. It is noteworthy that RCEP came about without participation of either the US or Europe. It has effectively created the world's largest trading bloc according to the RAND Corp. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, SWIFT, the largest global payment settlement network, has already experienced drop-off in dollar transactions in its most recent readings. It is interesting that this occurred after the implementation of RECP, although the timing also comes in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic disruptions. This change is coming, and we should be ready for the changes as it comes. All right, so why is that important? Because not only are they taking steps right now to to pretty much dethrone the dollar from being the world reserve currency, other countries are going to eventually join them because they're going to have the stronger economy. They're going to have the stronger currency. As you heard in the previous video that I played for you, all right, when politicians get to the point where they cannot even pay themselves, they're going to look for other venues, and that is going to be the next currency that is going to be the strongest of them all. And right now, China has positioned itself to be that currency. So now that China and 14 other countries have come together and they're trading in their own currency, which is going to morph into only being the yuan, because China's going to dominate, they're going to be forced to use the yuan, and not only that, it's going to be used globally, forcing the United States to go into hyperinflation. And not only that, once China has that type of power, they are going to use that power to sanction the United States. We saw it as soon as the Trump administration got out of the country. What happened is that China, as soon as they got out, China sanctioned Pompeo and some other ones. I can't remember it right now. The point is that the people who were strongly against China during the Trump administration were sanctioned by China. So this is what they're going to be doing later when they become the world currency of the world in the next several years. How long is it going to be? Probably before 2025, because I have shared with you this information before, that by 2024, they're going to surpass the United States in GDP growth, right? And that was before the pandemic even started. With the pandemic now, with this going on, our GDP decrease, I believe it was 3%, while China's increased 2.1%. And when you're talking trillions of dollars, that is a big increase or decrease. So that is why I do believe that they are taking the steps right now, not only for them to prop themselves to be the next world currency, but also other countries to start leaving the dollar, fleeing away from the dollar, and going into the yuan. Okay, the next headline should really send chills down your spine, because this is what is going to tie all of this together. Because we understand what a cryptocurrency is, and once a government creates their own cryptocurrency, it's going to be devastating for all the other currencies around the world. And China has done it. They have achieved it. Here's the headline. SWIFT sets up joint venture with China Central Bank ahead of imminent digital yuan launch. That's from Verge. Before I get into the article, why is that important? SWIFT is not owned by the United States. Not technically. They are only used by the United States because they have, the greater power to use it. Because the United States has the ability right now to even clobber SWIFT over the head if they don't comply. They can twist their arm. But it looks like, because of this headline and what's in it, the people who own SWIFT, they're going to pretty much turn their back against the United States and throw themselves into the arms of China. And once they do that, that's when we're going to see our financial woes increase very, very rapidly. Or at least that is my analysis, and that's the way that I see things. The article goes on to say, in a recent report from HSBC, said that China's digital currency, quote, will help increase oversight of money flows while also raising the efficiency of cross-border payments and facilitate yuan internationalization, end quote. But what will really do is make money laundering virtually impossible, as every single currency transaction will be trackable in real time. China's cross-border payment system, CIPS, both partners and competes with SWIFT amid growing Sino-US tensions. Greater use of the ICPS instead of the Belgium-based SWIFT system would reduce exposure of China's global payment data to the United States. One may also expect China to try to get all countries involved in its Belt and Road Initiative to use the DCEP and therefore the renminbi. Today, the renminbi is still a small currency in comparison to the euro and most of all the dollar. But this situation can change if the DCEP becomes widely acceptable. In the context of situation in which the euro international position has more or less stagnated over the last decade, this is at the very least somewhat disconcerting. Of course, we may expect that once the digital renminbi takes off and gains traction, other central banks will react strongly, especially the U.S. will be determined to hold on to the dollar's international dominance. The U.S. authorities will soon understand that a successful digital renminbi may be in long run turn out to be a larger threat to the position of the US dollar than the euro ever was. The most important difference is that the euro is institutionally weak, and European politicians have so far failed to use their currency as a geopolitical instrument. The Chinese government, in contrast, understands very well the power of the money as a peaceful instrument to increase international political clout. All right, so there it is. All of this ties together. How? This is how it's tied together. One, we are printing ourselves into oblivion. Countries around the world are looking at how much money we are printing, how much we're spending, how much the Fed, balance sheet is increasing, and they're kind of starting to look at other venues that they're going to be able to flee to. Okay, this is something that I've always shared with you. That once the economic collapse happens, rich people and middle class and upper middle class are going to flee the country to other places that are going to have a strong currency. Right now, China's positioning itself to be, because for one, they have a lot of gold, and they're going to be able to back that up with the digital currency. Okay, so what is a digital currency going to do in the future once other countries not only start implementing their own, but they start using the yuan as the main payment system? Okay, this is what's going to happen. But first, I have to tell you really what a cryptocurrency is. And most of you already know this, but I'm just going to recap. A cryptocurrency has the ability to be used all throughout the world. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States, or you go over to Asia, you go over to Europe, you go over to Africa, you go to South America. It doesn't really matter. If another person accepts cryptocurrency, which in this coin would be Bitcoin, then you can trade back and forth without the government being involved. That is the one reason why other people really love Bitcoin, because they can see that in the future, if they need to trade with each other, they don't have to get the government involved. Now, the government eventually is going to completely nuke Bitcoin, because countries do not like when another currency is competed with them. Right now, the only reason they're tolerating it is because there's no real system out there to get Bitcoin circulated. Okay, you cannot just go to the gas station and pay in Bitcoin. That system is not in place right now. If it was in place, then the government would step in and would stop it right away, because Bitcoin would be the same thing as you counterfeiting dollars. The reason that is because once you counterfeit dollars, right, not only can you print as many as you want, but you're devaluing the dollar, and then, a lot of things happen. The government does not like that. They will put you in federal prison faster than you can blink. What Bitcoin does is kind of exactly the same thing, because there's people who can mine their own. Bitcoin can be mined from a computer somewhere. I don't know exactly how it works, the mining works, but I do understand that somebody started Bitcoin by mining it in their own, I think it was in their own apartment. Anyways, the point is that once that starts to be a worldwide accepted type of payment, the governments all around the world are going to stop it. They're already talking about doing that. Okay? Now, with the yuan, right? Now that we talked about that for a second, the yuan, what it's going to do, being a cryptocurrency, not only is it going to be able to track every payment that you do, in real time, like it said, it's going to be used internationally. If digital currencies, cryptocurrency can be traded back and forth like Bitcoin, the same thing is going to happen with the yuan. Now, with the Belt and Road Initiative, what they did is that they're building all this infrastructure all around the countries. Once they have their own system in place, and they start trading with all those countries in the currency of the yuan, because everybody's going to implement it, that's going to skyrocket the power of the yuan. And that's just completely going to obliterate the dollar. Yes, the United States is working on a digital dollar, but the Chinese have beat them to the game. And now that the Asian countries have come together to create a financial bloc, that is just going to be even more, that's going to become more of interest to other countries. Let's say Mexico joins them, and then they start trading in the yuan as well, because, it's a cryptocurrency now. Let's say Russia starts doing that. That's one of the main allies. The Middle East, countries in the Middle East like Iran, if they start trading in the yuan, there's nothing the United States can do. They might try to do sanctions, but if they're no longer trading with the United States and other countries are not accepting the dollar anymore, what is it going to do to them? Nothing. Because there's another system in place for them to be able to trade. That is the reason why that is very important. Now, this is the last article for this podcast. Now, in previous podcasts, right? This past week, before all of this, I pretty much talked about the economy in very big detail because of this. First, we started with how it's affecting citizens, then how it's affecting the nationwide, and now we're talking about how it's affecting other countries. That is the three steps, the three cycles of it, I guess. The citizens, nationwide effect, and now worldwide effect. When the politicians can no longer pay themselves, they're going to run to the yuan. They're going to leave the dollar behind. They're going to flee over there. They're going to put their money in there, especially the rich people, the billionaires who are playing the casino of the Wall Street right now. They're going to flee to China, and then all of this is going to implode very, very drastically, very, very rapidly. That's why you have to make sure that you take the steps right now. With all this money printing that they're doing, with the $5,600 that they're going to send you, probably more, depending on how many children you got and all of that, with all the money that they're sending you right now, that's free, that you're not supposed to have, that it's not supposed to be given to you in your bank account, you can use all of that money for you to take the steps in order for you to have your own self-sufficient system in your own backyard. All right, let's say they do send you $5,600, and they send you the $600. Let me take out a calculator real quick, because I wasn't planning on doing this. So they send you $5,600, right? Plus the $600 that they sent in December. Let's say you haven't spent it already. Plus the $1,200 that they sent you on last year. And of course, that's if you didn't spend it already. All right. In total, they already send you, or they would send you $7,400. Now they're talking about a child tax credit of $3,000 per kid if they're 6 years and older. $3,500, I think it was, if it was 5 and younger. Let's say from after this payment of the $5,600, let's say next month, they start rolling out $3,000, because they did say that they wanted to kind of like divide it into the year, like 12, get that $3,000 divided by 12 and send it in payments. All right, that would be the $900. Let me do that real quick. Let me write that down. $7,400. I was not thinking about doing this, but since we're here, $9,000 divided by 12, right? That's assuming that you have 3 children. Divided by 12, that would be a payment each month of $750. That means that all of that money, well, there you go. I just thought about it. Let's just do $9,000 for the whole year, plus the $7,400 that they would send by next month. That's a total of $16,400. A big chunk of that could buy you land somewhere, whether it's, 2-3 acres, but that means it would be yours. And not only that, you will still have enough money left over for you to buy the equipment that you would need for you to be able to till the ground. All right. That would buy you the seeds that you would be able to put up for the next harvest. That would give you enough for you to buy the tools, like shovels and stuff like that. That could even give you the money for you to go to the grocery store and stock up grains, so you can put them in your pantry and, in a shed or whatever, for you to have plenty of food for the next 2 years. And the reason, again, I'm going to touch on that. The reason you want 2 years for the food is because since you're going to grow your own food, if you have crop failure, you can rely on that food. Okay. But the reason that you have to do it now is so you can learn and work out all the kinks and really understand how farming works in order for you to do it successfully when all of this collapses. What else can you do? You know, you can do a bunch of things with $16,400 that will more than likely be in your pocket by this time next year. And that's not including next year's taxes. I mean, what if this is, you know, the $9,000 on top of whatever else they decide to do? What if the economy is still in the slumps and there's still mass unemployment and they said the pandemic ramped up and there's a bunch of stuff, a bunch of death everywhere or a bunch of cases everywhere because of coronavirus, and they do another lockdown, and then again they send another, let's say $1,400, or let's say another $5,600. Let's say they did that. Okay, if you were to add another $5,600, that would be $22,000. $22,000. Think about all the things you can do for you to make sure that you have everything in place for you to prepare, for you to have the mentality of not just consuming, but what can you produce, right? Think along those lines. If you're a prepper and you think, you know, of prepping in a selfish way, that you're just preparing for you and yourself, if anybody in your family comes knocking on your door, you're just going to send them away. If, you know, your neighbor tries to break in or whatever, just blast them away. Or, you know, you're just going to buy a bunker and stock up all the stuff that you can for however long you can do it. You really have to change that into, even though you can have this, you know, the stuff stocked up, you can have the bunker, you can have the weapons, you can do all of these things. Shift it from being selfish to helping your community and having a way for them to help you in the farm and or be able to donate all the stuff. All right, like I mentioned in the previous podcast, if you can do that, you're going to be very important in the community. And if you're a Christian and you can put a Christian message into what you're doing, that's going to save even more souls. All right, so that's why we have to make sure that we change that we shift our way of thinking from being a selfish prepper who's just waiting for that one event to happen where everything collapses, to shifting to not being selfish, helping your community, and preparing in a way that all of this is going to last for very many years. Because how long you think a dollar collapse is going to last for? Including Chinese sanctions, because they're having the revenge on the United States. If for us against Venezuela, they're already in that for 6, 7, 8+ years, how much longer would we be in it? People are going to flee, right? And people are going to try to have a better life somewhere else. But for the people who stay, who knows that they have nowhere to go or they're not willing to go, they can take steps right now to be able to have a better future later on. And of course, all of this does not include war, which I'm going to talk about that here in this podcast. All right, so I want to leave you with those thoughts. This is the end of this second podcast. All right, for me, it's a continuation. I'm going to continue talking about it. You know, this video is already 2.5 hours before I even edit it. Now I'm going to finish it here, and I'm going to start the other one with its own introduction, but it's part of this series. So I really encourage you to stay, to listen to all of it and stay all the way to the end, get all this information, share it with your friends and family. Visit the store, ManMadeSurvivalStore.com. There we're giving a book away for free. Okay, and you can get it, you can see what's in it, you can share it with friends and family, you can just give it out. The book is absolutely free. All we need your help is with shipping. All right, the book is retail for $24.99. The shipping is $9.99. So you are getting it for free. So that's one way that you can help others right now, by getting them to listen to this podcast, by giving them the free book, by doing all these little steps. If you can help me financially by buying something on the store, or even giving a donation in Patreon.com, you can just share this. What would really help me is that this information gets spread out everywhere. Other people become fans of the show, and the views increase to right now I can muster about 10,000 people a month. If we can increase to 30, 40, 50, 100,000 a month, that would be great. That would help me. That would help you. And all the plans that I have for preparedness, as far as the community is concerned, will be able to be done. So this is taking baby steps. Once this really goes out there, you're going to see that we're going to be great things in this prepper community that have never been seen in the history of prepping before. But we need your help. If you cannot help us financially, just help us by spreading this podcast. All right, so this is the end of this podcast. I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. Remember, my name is Jose Prado, always ready.
We had protection in this bill. We passed an amendment that specifically said if you're an American citizen or here legally in the country, you would get a trial by jury. It was explicitly stated, and it's been removed in the conference committee. It's been removed because they want the ability to hold American citizens without trial in our country. This is so fundamentally wrong and goes against everything we stand for as a country that it can't go unnoticed and should be pointed out. Now, proponents of indefinite detention without trial say that an accusation alone is sufficient, that these crimes are so heinous that trials are unnecessary. They will show you pictures of foreigners in foreign dress from foreign lands and say that that's what this debate is about. It is untrue. This debate is about American citizens accused of crimes in the United States. Make no mistake that the faces of terrorism include awful people who should be punished to the full extent of the law. But the same portrait of evil could be drawn of domestic terrorists, of domestic terror and domestic violence. One could parade pictures of Charles Manson, of Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma bomber, of Jeffrey Dahmer. And people would cry out that they don't deserve a trial either. But when we think about it, when most Americans understand at some level that when you're accused of a crime in our country, you get a trial. You get a trial by a jury of your peers, no matter how heinous your crime is, no matter how awful you are, we give you a trial. This bill takes away that right and says that if someone thinks you're dangerous, we'll hold you without a trial. It's an abomination. It should not stand. Most Americans understand that you are accused of a crime doesn't make you guilty of a crime. You get your day in court. Now, some here may not care when they determine that they're going to detain Ahmed or Yusuf or Ibrahim, but many Americans and innocents are named Ahmed and Yusuf and Ibrahim. Many Americans are named Saul or David or Isaac. Is our memory so short that we don't understand the danger of allowing detention without trial? Is our memory so short that we don't understand the havoc that bias and bigotry can do when unrestrained by law? Your trial by jury is your last defense against tyranny, your last defense against oppression. We have locked up Arabs, we have locked up Jews, we have locked up the Japanese. Do you not want to retain your right to trial by jury? Do you want to allow the whims of government to come forward and lock up who they please without being tried?
The Man-Made Survival Show.